Hello everyone, my name is Eva Brendel. I'm an editor at Finance Magazine and will be today's host. Automation in companies is a topic that is often talked about, but tackling it is not always easy. How can you automate your enterprise and what are obstacles that you may face? That's today's topic. But first I want to introduce our speaker for today, which is Michael Fau. He's CIO at UiPath. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Before we start, I just wanted to tell you that we will have time for questions after the talk. If you have any questions during the talk, you can just use the chat and we will come back to your questions right afterwards. Now I will hand over to Mihai. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Eva, for receiving me on this webinar, and guten Tag to everyone. In my time as pupil in Romania Communist, I had to choose between two languages to learn in high school. One was Russian, the other one was German. Of course, I chose German, but it was for a short period of time, so I didn't learn too much. But of course, I know a few words and I can understand a little bit, but I'm not a German speaker, so my presentation will be entirely in English. So I will try to browse to the presentation. Eva, if you can give me control of the presentation.
Yes, one moment. I think my colleagues in the background will try to do that. Can you click through it now? Okay, maybe the colleagues in the background could do that for you. Okay, it's not working so far. Maybe we can start with a question.
Yes.
How did you come to this topic today? Why do you want to talk about automation, and what did UiPath do so far?
Yeah. So my name is Mihai Fauer. Let's make the intro first. I am currently Chief Information Officer at UiPath. I've been in this role for 1 year, but I was Chief Financial Officer at the beginning of the company. I was hired by Daniel Dines, the CEO of UiPath, back in 2016. I was CFO for 4 years, from 2016 till end of 2019. I took then the role of Chief Accounting Officer, and I moved to US, particularly to run the IPO readiness roadmap for UiPath. I took the company public in April 2021, and then I stayed as global controller for another 2 years. After 2 years of being global controller, I moved to the CIO role. And my journey, what I'm going to present today, is our internal journey on automation. So this is not a seller's pitch. This is strictly talking about how we use our own technology inside of the finance organization. And yeah, I can. So the presentation will be focused on 3 main swim lanes. The one would be our internal automation journey. Second, I will talk a little bit about our SAP implementation project that we are currently running now. We are 6 months into the SAP presentation, into the SAP implementation, and we have another 1 year until we will go live with certain countries. And the third will be focusing on how automation and AI can work together. Okay, a little bit about UiPath. UiPath has been incorporated in 2015. I joined beginning of 2016. Daniel Dines, the CEO, had already started to build some automation product back in 2005 when he returned from US. But when I joined the company, it was very small. Turnover end of 2015 was $200,000. By the end of 2016, it was 5 million, and currently now, for the fiscal year that will end in January 2025, we aim a total turnover of 1.5 billion. So in a span of 9 years, we grew from 5 million to 1.5 billion, which is quite impressive. We went public in April 2021, and I think we are number one now in automation. We have different sectors, and Gartners and other analysts are slicing and dicing the automation in different buckets. But when you talk about robotic process automation, we are number one. Over this period of time, we also acquired different technologies to add them on our technology stack, which took us from just being a robotic process automation, like where you automate structure and repetitive tasks, to these days where we have AI embedded in most of our products, where you can also tackle unstructured data and unstructured processes. This is a chart showing how we grew our revenue from 2018, 2019 until 2023. This is 1.2 billion. It's what we reported last fiscal year. As you can see here, in terms of percentages, we are showing the digital workforce. This means total number of hours that were saved by using automation instead of hiring people. When I was in finance, as a CFO, my first idea and my first project was to hire people and also to implement systems. But I did that for 3 years. And when I realized beginning of 2019, if you want to go public, then what we need to have a very correct, streamlined process, and we need to be able to close our books in time. One of the challenge was at that time that if you want to go public, you need to have fiscal financial statements audited, and you need to have at least 2 fiscal years of audited financials. So 2019 was our first fiscal year of audited financials, but I was not able to close this process because I was missing one technology, and that technology was around the way we do revenue recognition. And since our ERP, which is NetSuite, was NetSuite because it was switched to SAP, was not able to deal with CISO 6 or IFRS 15, we had to use a different solution. And at that moment, I asked one of the GSI to build a technology around revenue recognition process. They failed completely, and I realized that I haven't used my technology. We haven't used our UiPath technology. So I turned to our technology, and we built a solution, automation, which was focusing on doing the RevRec for our transactions. Simple one, but also a technology, a solution that was built connecting different robots. What we did, we took out the billings, the invoices from our billing engine. We inputted the rules of the CISO 6. We also inserted the human in the loop to validate certain contracts above a threshold value. And with all this, we created the revenue arrangements, the revenue waterfalls, all the different revenues, all the journal entry postings, remaining performance obligations, everything that is needed for the RevRec process. We took that data and then we book it into the ERP. So that was a success. We then realized how important the automation was to finalize this task, and we were able to complete the 2 fiscal years audit within a matter of 3-4 months. Also 2019 and 2020, we used entirely this brute force RevRec automation. And from that moment onwards, I realized that what we need to do in order to decrease our closing process to be a public company, we had to deploy a lot of automation. So we deployed from end of 2019 until now around 300 automations, mainly in finance. Most of them are in finance. And this help us in keeping the same number of people in finance that I used to have in 2018. Actually, the number decreased in time because there was like natural attrition. And you can see that, you know, revenue increased, transaction increased, number of customers increased, but we kept the same number, even lower in our back office for our finance operations, and not only finance, but they have also sales operations, legal operations, all the corporate operations. Going public also, and the automation help us a lot in making sure that we can file in time. By the time of when we went public, before we went public, I would say end of 2019, we were 60 days closing process for our books. By the time we went public, we were around 15 days. That was really, really impressive. Now we are, after another 3 years from the moment we went public, we are 5 days in the closing process. In total, we deploy in the company, and I'm talking about general, the entire company, around 620 automations that are in production. As I said, 50% of them are in finance, but we deploy a lot in people operations, and they're picking up ideas and pushing the Center of Excellence to develop more automations lately, but also in sales operations, and especially in the deal desk governance. In total, if you add up the automations idea, we have around 2,700. We are capturing all these ideas in our automation hub. Is a component of our platform where we can, you know, people can submit the ideas, and then depending on the ideas, they are, you know, then routed either to Center of Excellence, especially those that are very complex, or to the citizen developers where you have the task level or task automations simpler. I'll just give examples of key automations in different departments, just so you have an idea. In finance, we have a lot of killer automations, I would call them, critical for our closing process, and I'll also mention them later on. Order integration is helping to connect Salesforce or configure price quote with the billing engine. It's basically sending data that are necessary for the finance department to issue invoices to our customers. These data are coming from the CRM, from our Salesforce environment, where sellers are closing the deals. But giving this data in an automated way, which is event-based triggering, allow us to issue the invoices faster. We also send data between the two systems, like, you know, customer accounts, SKUs, pricing, and also, you know, tax codes. And this is, you know, facilitating us to do not have a backlog of invoices by the end of the quarter, by the end of the month. We close our billings within 1 day from every quarter or every month. 24 hours, we close everything that is in the backlog. We have another automation that it's continued to work on the order to cash process, which is reading the bank statement and is applying collected amounts from customers directly into our ERP, doing actually the clearing of those accounts receivable balances. This has of 85% to 90% matching success. An automation that can be actually, you know, developed and improved with the new technologies that UiPath has, where you can those amounts that are not matched can be validated by the humans, and new rules can be added to the initial rules. So then when an exact case will happen later, the matching will increase and it will happen. We have in Procure to Pay 2 top automations. One is the two-way match. We have Procure to Pay system where we issue the POs to our vendors, having a policy: if you don't have a PO, there's no pay. So we issue POs to our vendors. When the invoice is coming from the vendors, usually you have to key in the invoice so you can match it with the PO. Not all the vendors are keying in by themselves the invoices, so we have to do it ourselves. What we did, we have an intelligent document processing called document understanding that is able to read the invoice details and is automatically keying in into the procure to pay system the data with the invoices, when the same automation does the matching. If there is a mismatch between the data, then the human is triggering this loop to validate. Once the human validates, so doesn't key in, just validates, the data is sent for 3-way match, where the business accepts the invoice and then the data are sent directly into the ERP. So this 2-way match is quite important for us. Accrual reporting is another important automations. We are reading the data from Coupa, which is our P2P system that I mentioned, and is proposing accruals by the end of the month that are then reviewed by the accountants before they are pushing into the ERP. We have a lot of automations in tax, especially when we do transfer pricing calculation and intercompany posting, taking the data outside of the system and then applying the intercompany rules, which are based on the intercompany agreements, and then creating also the journal entries. It's something that we do it on a monthly basis, so we have the capability of running intercompany transactions for more than 40 entities, and I think we have 3 at least type of intercompany transaction per each entity, so more than 120 calculations on a monthly basis we are running for intercompany. In people operations, we have I would say a lot of automations helping mostly with the interview process, schedule interviews. There's an automation that helps the people that are interviewing candidates to create meetings, looking at the schedules and asking the candidates about free time. The automation checks and validates the time slots for our people in the talent acquisition teams and propose dates and meetings, and even creates the link necessary for the meeting. We also created a chatbot that does frequently asked questions for people ops. This is powered by a conversational business application and is using UiPath technology. And in sales, we have a lot of, maybe I would say, medium complexity automations helping with in general with know your customer, getting the data outside of the systems, proposing different prices to our sellers for different customers, knowing the history of those customers, or I would say similar category of similar customers doing the same or asking for the same SKUs and products. And one important what we do, we use the same technology, document understanding, to extract the data from customers' PO this time, and to see if the customer POs contain any non-standard legal clause that would be, I would say, overwriting some of the master agreements or the quote agreement that the customer signed. This is important to understand whether there are some misalignment between the two. This is going back to the finance now. I would just want to show here the system diagram, more than 20 applications just in finance department doing different processes or sub-processes. In the center would be NetSuite, which now we are currently in the process of replacing it with SAP. But we have a lot of applications. Coupa does procure to pay, Financial Force does professional services, Avalara is helping with the sales tax codes. So as you can see, all of these technologies are doing subsets of the process, whether it's order to cash or procure to pay, or record to report in the case of revenue recognition, or treasury or tax, or even hire to retire. They're all connected. So if you think about a process, the process can be system driven, but it's also driven by the human. So when you think about the manual work that it's put into effort by the humans. Some of it's manual and repetitive, and some of it's also manual, but maybe not repetitive and maybe not that structural. So the first part of the manual work that is repetitive and it's very structured can be easily automated. The second one can also be automated with the recent technologies where you have the Gen AI and the new technologies with the document understanding that is trying to get the data from different contexts and put it in a structural format. All these systems, as you can see here, have to communicate with each other. We use a lot of our automation to drive systems integration between these systems. And this is what we did internally. Going back to finance again, just a high-level slide on the numbers. We deployed automations in different departments. Accounting mainly is driving most of these automations. And I would say accounting and payroll team have probably the heaviest transactions, the highest number of transactions and repetitive ones. So we try to find all the ideas possible to minimize the number of manual journal entries, for example, and see what's system driven, what's manual driven, and then automate those that are manual as much as possible. Commercial finance is where we do the billings and the cash collections and sales compensation calculation. Finance IT is where we deployed most of the systems integrations between systems. Procurement, tax, treasury, controllership as well. We have a lot of automations and I will talk about them. FP&A and why not internal audit. And we have other automations that we use even for our relation with external auditors. We are able to give the data to our external auditors within few hours. Once we get the PBC list from our auditors, we are able to give all the data almost within 3-4 hours. What we did to decrease our 60-day close in 2019, 30-day close in 2020 to almost 5 days where we are now, 15 days in 2021. We use different killer automations. I talk about some of them. I'll mention the others. Payroll Reconciler, it's where we are doing, where the automation is reading the payroll statements and is creating the journal entries and creating those journal entries. Then automations will push those journal entries directly into the ERP. Those journal entries will enter into a workflow where the human validates. The automation also uploads the data into the ERP. So when the human does the approval of the automation of the journal entry, can also look at the backup and the support of journal entry. That's the Payroll Reconciler. The control pack is where the automation will extract the trial balance and will create a P&L, a balance sheet, and all the vouchers necessary, fixed assets, prepayment, open items for accounts receivable, open items for accounts payable. We'll create this pack and we'll trying to give the best of the flux analysis so controllership can go and review the data. Finance captaining is doing that integration between the CRM, the Salesforce, and the billing engine, and is helping us in clearing the backlog of invoices in real time. Integration champions, a lot of integrations between those systems that I explained to you. I'll give you one simple example of, we are sending the data from Bloomberg, the FX rate, into the ERP system using this integration, And from NetSuite or SAP, we will also send FX rates to other systems, which are boundary systems, whether it's a Workday for human resource, whether it's Avalara for FP&A, whether it's Salesforce for the CRM and for the sales operations. I talk about cash application where we book our accounts receivable, where we book the cash collections for our accounts receivable. Book my accrual is where the automation does accrual proposition and postings. Tax Grandmaster, where we do all the intercompany transactions and all the postings. Miss the Disbursement, where we do accounts payable two-way match using document understanding and Action Center. Action Center being a validation center where the human is in the loop. And we also have another automation where we create a PDF document or a Word document where the automation is reading the flux analysis and is creating explanations on why certain general accounts are showing an increase or a decrease, what happens in certain entities, and so on, purely financial. I will share with you all these slides. You can see here the number of automations and different ones on these departments. You can use it in many instances. Some of them could be simple, some of them could be much more complex. But even automations, I will give you the example the red one, automations to run depreciation prepayments schedules. Why having the human going and doing 4 clicks to run a depreciation or prepayment, where you can trigger this outside of your ERP system by say run depreciation or run prepayments, and you can do that by just either scheduling or doing an attended automation. We do a lot of bad debt calculation and reporting with automation. We take the data out. We have the rules for creating, bad debts, whether that's general or specific, and everything is super automated. We can change the rules, and then that's a simple adjustment to the automation, and then you can leave it and you can run it. No need to drive the data into Excel and do your own VLOOKUPs or do your own formulas. Once you build it, you can run this with the automation. We are doing SAFTI reporting, which is required for Europe. We did that for our European subsidiaries. Not always the data that we have in our ERP, it's matching the data that is required by the fiscal authorities. So we build this this automation, and it's working quite well. We do a lot of in controllership. I would just mention one. As I mentioned this, and I like this very much. Preparation of audit evidence is required by the external audits. The automation goes into the ERP and extracts all data. Data needs to be there. So once we do that, automation does everything for us. In procurement, I said we have vendor onboarding process and other automations. We have an Ask Procurement chatbot in place that is helping our people to drive to the realm of procurement. And in finance IT, mostly what we have here is systems integrations. We use automations. We decided not to use other middlewares where you can script your integration, but use automation as it's flexible and easy to deploy. This was just a showcase of the Cash application, which I mentioned to you, what is happening. We reduce the time of our people in Cash App team from 7 minutes to book a collection per invoice to seconds, and we are able to close our cash postings in real time. Basically, we are waiting for the bank to send us the bank statements end of the quarter. And accruals is, maybe I can double click on this one. What we do is we have an automation that is screening all the POs, open POs that are in Coupa, and depending on the user and the owner of that specific service, the automation will ask those business about the percentage of services that have been delivered. We're strictly talking about purchase orders to vendors for which an invoice has not been received. So asking the percentage of services is really important because we can estimate what would be the accrual. Once the business is giving the data back in a very simple format using communications mining, we are able to extract that percentage and look at the PO and create and propose an accrual posting. That accrual posting has all the data related to the GL account, cost center, and of course the vendor. So all these accruals postings are sitting in an action center. It's like a validation user interface application where the accountants are going and are validating them. Once they are validated, then those are pushed as journal entries into the ERP with an auto reversal mechanism. This is actually, we are very proud of this automation because it really streamline the accrual process. Automation Hub is what I mentioned earlier, is where we are gathering all the ideas. Everyone can go into Automation Hub and they have a guide of how to create this idea. Of course, we are asked how much effort is into whatever manual task or manual process that they are doing. They will receive also similar. They will receive comparisons with other automations, and all these ideas put in the Automation Hub are then channeled through our Center of Excellence, where they will decide whether that specific idea is something for the COE, or to go to the RPA developers, or something that can stay with the citizen developers. The complexity makes the difference. Okay. I just want to touch for like 5 minutes our journey on SAP. As I mentioned, UiPath entered into a strategic partnership with SAP last year, and part of this strategic partnership, we are replacing NetSuite with SAP, and I believe it's the right thing to do for us. We believe that NetSuite is not able to cope with the number of transactions and the lines of our revenue arrangements. In particular, this is our pain point, and we wanna lead this implementation differently. We want to be customer zero. Customer zero means that we want to implement SAP using our own technology in partnership with Deloitte. That would, of course, mean have a different approach on how we do this implementation and think about automation rather than doing scripting using SAP, using ABAP developers. So everything that will be in the realm of product enhancement or product gaps, or user story gaps, we want to evaluate whether that gap can be fulfilled with automation or with BTP or SAP/SAP enhancement. At the end of this project, we will create an automation playbook which will define the future methodology that Deloitte will approach on when they do SAP implementation, whether that's a migration from on-prem to cloud or that's a new implementation of SAP S/4HANA. This automation playbook will contain the framework, but also a list of reusable components of automations. We are going to deploy automations in all the phases. The first phase of Discover, we are going to leverage the Automation Hub, where we are going to collect all the automation needs. The way we did it, we also deploy process mining and test mining to review our existing processes and give us insights into what processes we can streamline, simplify, and what processes can be automated versus what processes will be automated by SAP. So there will be I would say a dual view on a process, what we can keep in SAP as standard and what we can do with automation where you have variations of your processes. And of course, you always have your particular needs as a business, and those particular needs can be fulfilled by SAP as a standard. If this will not be standard in SAP, then that will require enhancement. We look at that enhancement, or we call it user story gap or product gap, through the lenses of automation. And sometimes we decide whether that's okay for the automation versus it's not okay, and we leave it with SAP, and then we enhance SAP. I'll just give the example of allocations of expenses between cost centers. SAP is quite rigid, and we have quite a dynamic way of looking at expense allocation. Just give the example of rent. Rent goes to one GL account and it has to go to one cost center. It's coming out of the leasing module, but then we have to allocate it within different departments on a monthly basis. If your departments are changing in terms of numbers, so let's say if you have sales and finance, and in the first month sales is 50 people and finance 50 people, then you have 50-50 allocation of real estate costs between the two departments. But if in the next month, I would say we hire 60 people in finance and we have only 50 people, 60 people in sales, and we have the same number in finance 50, then the allocation key will be different. What we are going to do using automation, we are going to take the data from the GS and from the cost centers into an action center, into a validation center using the automation. And having these rules in this automation, we'll be able to recreate cost allocation journal entries that will be pushed back into the system. That will be much more easier than really scripting the entire SAP to do this. In other cases, we will allow SAP to, and we will build enhancement on SAP. In the migration process, which is, I would say, the phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, we have tested manually the upload of data from the old ERP to SAP. And we are not just migrating open items or trial balances, we are also migrating all the transactions. So in doing so, we tested first manually using Excel and using convergence files and using manual upload through the SAP. We tested that and we had the lessons learned, and then we build an automation that is doing the migration for all the entities for all the months. So we are now in the phase of migrating for our 40 entities that are subject to SAP, the data, the transactions data using automations. I talk about enhancement of the product gaps in SAP. We have a lot of other automations that are related to systems integrations. We have SAP S/Finance, but around SAP Finance, SAP S/4HANA, we have different applications that are not SAP. Of course, we link all of those using automations. And we have other solutions like accrual, payroll, that will sit on top of SAP and will help us drive certain processes. For the testing, we are using test suite automation. We are running different test cases. We are automating those test cases, and when we are running data through those. I'll give you the example of creating a general ledger account in one entity. That could be a test case that you have step by step. It's a process. We automate that process using test suite, and then we are running that test on all the 40 entities just to make sure. We did this for one entity and then for UK, and we said let's do it for Australia, and of course it failed. But it failed not because of the test, but because the Australian environment was set up a little bit different than UK. So we realized what the defect was, and then we corrected. But we could have done this not by the humans, but through the automation. Total ideas coming out of our SAP implementation project. A lot of ideas were classified in product gaps, or where we can see possible enhancement for SAP, where we drive this through the automation. A lot of business process automation, where we have this accrual, the payroll, which are quite complex solution automations that are sitting on top of SAP, not built in SAP, but on top of SAP. Of course, a lot of transformations that are particular to the implementation or to the delivery transformation, like the migration, and other retrofit automations. If you think about it, integrating, Coupa or integrating Bloomberg with SAP, that's a retrofit, because instead of having NetSuite, you have SAP. All of this is actually helping us speeding up the SAP implementation project. by far it gives us at least 1 or 2 months, and we are in line with our deadline. And not only that, but we can show a different way of doing ACP. It's actually will help ACP to drive better implementation in the future. A lot of automations that are either retrofit or new ones that are also impacting different processes. I'm not gonna stay too much on them because you will all have access to the deck. We'll just touch for another 2 minutes the automation journey, and now powered by artificial intelligence. As you can see, back in 2018, UiPath started as a robotic process automation, where mostly we were able to read screens and do integrations or do automation using the user interface. In time, we also build API automations, which is, I would say, the backend automation. So not UI, but the backend. One is front end, the other one will be a backend automation, helping us to drive, automation through the API, allow us to run more data in the backend without the possibility of automation to fail through the UI. In 2020, we built the cloud orchestrator to manage all the automations in cloud, but we also brought the action center or the validation center and insights and other cloud components. Then we also acquired a company that were building a technology around process mining and test mining and test capture, which is helping us in the discovery process. We built the test suite back in 2021. Afterwards, we built the document understanding technology, which is able to read and extract content from Words, PDFs, and other documents, as well as communications mining, able to take the data out of communications, emails, and text. And recently, we developed more than 70 models. We trained more than 70 models on a large language models, different ones. Basically, we took the OpenAI and we put on top of it a layer of security, a trust, and we trained that models. We have more than 70 models at this moment, which ended up in different technologies, helping those technologies to be better. And recently, we have in public preview the Autopilot, which is trying to help the developers, the testers, and the business users to drive better automations without the need of scripting too much. So it's helping in building the automations. This flywheel is really interesting. You can see the generative AI technologies that are supported by UiPath, used by UiPath to build the specialized AI, which you see on the right-hand side. And these specialized AI are able to read the documents, the screens, the tasks, and the processes. More than 17 models of specialized AIs are then used into the solutions where you can have, document understanding, so extraction of data from documents, communications mining, extracting data, meaningful data from emails and other communication channels, process mining, trying to extract the data of existing processes, and test mining as well from what the human does on his computer. All of these are then used in the process orchestration, where we actually bring together the context, and these technologies gives action. The context being documents, communications, data, people, processes, where the action is integration to user interface or API or human in the loop. Ja, vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Sorry for the last one. Quite difficult.
So your German is good enough for this closing sentence. Thanks. Thanks, Mihai, for the interesting presentation. We now have time for some questions. So if you have any questions, just use the chat. I will start with one of my questions. So you showed a lot of possibilities for automation, but where should you start if you want to achieve automation in finance? What would your advice be?
So focus on those processes where are dependent or are triggering a lot of transactions. Yeah. So vendors processing accounts payable, processing accounts receivable, processing cash collections or cash payments. So I think in the procure to pay, order to cash, and treasury and even tax, those processes are heavily driven by a number of transactions. Yeah. And you have a lot of work there, and I think a lot of humans are doing a lot of keying of data. I guess these days, all the companies have different systems that are kind of communicating with each other, but there are still gaps and loopholes, I would say, in these processes. So there's still a lot of effort inputted in those manual effort, I would say. Yeah, where you have very structured and repetitive work, you should deploy automations. They should be straightforward. And for example, you can build an automation in maybe 1-2 days easily. But what you need is have clear process and good understanding of what you do. If you have that, it's very easy for the automation to be built.
And who are the main stakeholders for a successful automation story, in your opinion?
Yeah, so there was a report issued by Gartner 4 years ago where I think finance use cases were like weighing 80% of the total automation use cases. These days, I see ratio being more 60% finance, 40% the rest of the operations. If you think about finance, you have people in the back office, in billings, accounting, treasury, payroll. These are the business users, and they for sure know what they do because they do things in the systems and they do things outside of the system. So, and we do things with the external parties. So connecting all these dots will give them a good insight of what should be automated versus what should not be automated. I always believe that you should not, these ideas should not come from the top, but should come from within, coming from the business, and they should be allowed to express their ideas and try to think differently. Yeah, they have to be exposed. That's my also my experience. When we build a center of excellence was a support for the finance. So we in finance were the one driving the ideas, not the COE. Center of excellence was rather support for us to build those automations, but they were gathering the ideas from us. We just gave them the ideas and we just build it. We tested and it worked, and we gave him more ideas. So that's the way we did it.
We have one question from the audience about SAP, and the question is, why don't you use SAP standard functionality, for example, cost allocation based on headcounts?
We can, but we have a dynamic key allocations that is changing from month to month, and what Deloitte told us, it's not straightforward, so they have to build an enhancement on that one. Maybe I will dive into more, but still under the negotiation, to be honest with you. Sometimes we are, for the first time, we are not users of SAP now, so we thought that would be easy to build automations. We did it manually, then we did it in a suite automatically, and with SAP sometimes might be lost in translation with Deloitte, but we will look into it. If it's possible, of course, we're going to use standard. So the concept is always use as much as possible standard, not adjust, not create script in SAP, then you have to maintain it. And every time you have an upgrade, you have to do regression testing.
You talked about your own process, but what are problems that you see from clients that they typically face when they want to have more automation in their company?
It's having clear understanding of the processes, I would say, not knowing how the process, even at UiPath, we didn't have very well processes designed or documented. So where I see struggle mostly is identifying those processes. And of course, you will always have simple processes, which could be task level automation, that you can do it quickly. But customers are looking for the bigger return of investment. For that, they need to do a little bit of an effort to identify, that process. Sometimes they know it, but usually finance people are usually very busy during the month, during the quarter. So it's like a never-ending vicious loophole. They never have time to go and dig deeply into what processes should be automated. Once they do that, they will see the power of it. I've seen companies and customers where they don't have a center of excellence and they're struggling versus those that have a center of excellence, automation center of excellence. And I'm not talking about UiPath, could be automation anywhere, Blue Prism or other automation companies. But the automation department, it's helping them in realizing and be trained on the technology, what the technology can do. Sometimes it's just a lack of training or lack of knowledge what automation can do. And also in most of the cases, lack of clear processes and understanding, documenting what they do.
You showed us before how much time was saved, and you also showed us the percentage of the human part in some of the processes. How do you track, or how are you tracking the capacity of your human and robotic colleagues?
Well, it's very simple. When you have an automation, the automation runs certain time, and you can monitor this for the full year, yeah. And you can add up the time that the automation runs versus the time that a human will do the same process. And then we compare the difference, and the difference is basically time saved. Of course, now that the human doesn't do that, the entire time will be allocated to the digital workforce. What we do, we with automations, we help ourselves, especially in the busy periods, yeah. So I would say people don't work more than 8 hours, and in the busy periods they work less than what they used to do before with the automation, because it's helping them, yeah. And it's not only that you can close faster, but you also have the possibility of scaling stuff. So if you have more transactions, you have to process more data. Just give the example of having more sales quota from our sellers. You'd have to add people on top of it to be able to run the same closing process. So with automation, not only that you have the data better, it's not prone to errors, but you are also a scalable company. So we compare by, looking at the time that our employees have. That's where we compare the power of automations. And if we are growing, we're not, afraid, because we know the automation is there to help. That was one of the pressure back in 2020, because we didn't have the people and we were scaling, and we couldn't close. So we don't have that. We are not afraid of that anymore.
At the end of your presentation, you talked about the role of AI in finance automation. I would be interested what is possible, and maybe what are areas where you think that AI is maybe a little bit overhyped even.
AI, generative AI is, yes, overhyped. I think what a lot of companies will do, they will be specialized AI, which means training that OpenAI to do certain things specifically to a certain industry, whether it's vertical or maybe even a horizontal one, but a vertical. So we train, for example, using OpenAI. So we took the OpenAI and we put a layer of security and we train it to read documents, for example, yeah, invoices. So we train it. The document understanding is actually powered by generative AI. It has a component of AI. And its document understanding is able to read invoices. When you have that power, you take those unstructured data into a structured format, and then you power that structured data to some actions. You have the user, you have the automation, create a journal entry, or post those invoice data into Coupa or procure-to-pay systems and match it with the PO. So generative AI is very important, but you have to train it. We train more than 17 models, which we use, as I said, on different technologies. Document understanding is one. Process mining is another one. We also use that in the Autopilot. Autopilot is the one for the developers. We have three: one for the developers, one for testers, and one for the business user. The one for the developers, it's actually a prompt in the studio where you design your automations, which is helping the developers of automations to write faster those automations. And it's using the power of GenAI or OpenAI on our technology. So we are able to allow the developers to write faster automations and better. And there will be probably so much train, and that it will be drag and drop. And what you can see now, the difference between a developer that is writing an automation versus a business user that could do a very simple task automation. Those two, the borderline will disappear in the next 5 to 10 years. So people will be able to write their own automations. And I believe that the future belongs to a business that embrace IT and to the IT that is embracing the business. If they don't, not necessarily combine, but there will be one group in the future. It will take some time, but business anyway will be powered by IT, and IT should power business and should understand the business. IT just for the sake of delivering hardware and doing network, that's like you have to transform the business. So Autopilot is going to help. But yeah, generative AI, it's hype. Get it specialized. It will take time to train those models, but we're not there. I'll give the example of Copilot. Copilot is a Microsoft product, and I'm not going to market Copilot, but I'll just give you as an example. Copilot is actually using OpenAI, and it's trained to read Microsoft Office type of documents. That's what Copilot does. You can ask Copilot, give me all the discussions with X, Y, and Z, tell me about it, make a summary. That would be Copilot for the documents, but Autopilot is for the developers. So GenAI, you have to get to specialized AI as a first step. It's happening.
Thank you very much. I think we are now at the end of our webinar. Also, a lot of thanks to our audience for listening. We hope you learned a lot and this webinar was helpful. We have more webinars coming up in this week and next week. You can see them here. So one is about the digital CFO, and the other one is about becoming crisis-proofed through integrated corporate planning. Check them out. And yeah, now all that I have to say is thank you, Mihai. Thanks for your time and have a nice day.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you. Bye-bye.